2 years ago, my PlayStation 4 broke, and I was looking to buy a new one. Being a high school senior and not having much money, I looked on Craigslist to see if I could find a good deal. After a couple of days of looking, I saw a new listing for one, and it was a really good price. I didn't waste any time and texted, asking if it was still available. The number texted back within 5 minutes, saying that it was. I asked if I could buy it later that day. They said yes, and they told me to come at 8 p.m. that night. I was excited to get the PlayStation, and about 7:30 I left. It was only about 15 minutes away and I arrived early. When I got to the house, it didn't look very nice. It was quite frankly gross looking. The grass in the front yard was way overgrown, and the driveway had cracks all over it. I could even see boards over one of the windows. I couldn't see inside of any other windows, because there was large blankets or something covering them. The neighborhood itself was not the best, but it wasn't too bad and did have a few nice houses. I waited in my car for a while, and finally I texted that I was there. They replied that the PlayStation was inside, and I should come in. At this point, the sun was setting, and I didn't feel very comfortable going into that house alone. For being the 17-year-old boy that I was, I told myself not to be scared, and I got out of my car and walked to the house. As I walked up to the door, I saw to the corner of my eye the blanket covering the windows move. I knew somebody had seen me, and I walked up to the step and knocked on the door. Nobody answered. Then I got a text saying to just come in. I slowly opened the door. As soon as I did, I could smell the strong old musty smell of the house. When I looked inside, all the lights were off. I didn't see anything. I was getting sketched out and thought about leaving. Just then, I saw light turn on from the other end of the house. It wasn't that bright, but it lit up the place a little bit. I called out and said hello, but there was no response. I took a couple steps inside. When I did, I saw the house had no furniture in it at all. Things were just seeming too weird to me. So I finally made up my mind for sure that it wasn't worth it and I was going to go home. I turned around to leave, and as I grabbed the door, I heard footsteps coming from the other room. I didn't stop to turn around. I got out and slammed the door shut behind me. I ran to my car and got in. I never looked back. I drove away, and when I got home, I had a text from the man. It was an expletive-filled text, telling me I shouldn't have left. I blocked the number, and decided to just look on eBay for a PS4 instead. This story happened last fall. My family got a new flat-screen TV in our house, so we decided to sell the old one. We listed it on Craigslist, and after a few days, a man responded to the ad. His name was Charles, and he wanted to come over to look at the TV. We scheduled the time and he came over. When he got there, he looked like a normal, average guy. He had an old truck and told us that he worked in construction. My dad and I invited him inside to our living room and showed him the TV. He seemed to like it a lot, and we thought he would buy it. But after a while, he said he would have to pass on it, and then he left. We were pretty disappointed that he didn't buy, but we figured it would sell anyways. Later that night, as I was in bed playing a game on my phone, I heard a noise of what sounded like something scraping on my window. I figured it was a tree branch or bug. But then I heard it again. It was enough to make me go over and look out the window. When I did, I didn't see anything and went back to bed. After a while, I finally got tired and shut off my phone to get some sleep. I closed my eyes, but just then I heard it again. This time it was more of a tapping. I wasn't facing the window, so I rolled over to my other side to look. When I did, I saw what looked like the back of a man. I recognized it as Charles, the man who was at our house earlier. I got up and walked over to the window, but he was gone. I went to my parents' room, but they were already sleeping. I debated whether I should wake up my dad or not, but decided I must have scared off the man, and I would tell him in the morning. I went to all the doors in the house and made sure they were locked, and then went back to my bedroom to go to bed. It took me a long time to fall asleep, but eventually I was able to. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound coming from my window again. I looked over to see the man, about halfway through the window, coming into my room. I screamed like a little girl at the top of my lungs. The man then backed out of the window and went back outside. My dad came into the room within a few minutes. He ran to the window, but the man had already run away again. After going outside, my dad couldn't find him, so we called the police to report the incident. It turns out the lock on my window was faulty, and that's how he was able to get in. Thinking of it still gives me the creeps. I am a 19-year-old girl. Last summer I needed to buy a new car after my old one's transmission broke. I went on Craigslist to buy it because that's where I had gotten my previous car, and I thought they had the best deals. I found a car that I liked, which was a 2013 Nissan Altima. The price was pretty good, so I contacted the seller and asked if I could look at it. He said his name was Brian, and he told me that he would be available on Friday evening, which was the next day. I agreed, and the next day I went to look at the car. We planned to meet at 6 p.m., but Brian ended up moving it to 7, saying he had stuff to take care of. We met at his house, and I drove there in my dad's car he was letting me use. Brian lived in a pretty average-looking neighborhood, and his house looked pretty decent. When I arrived, I saw the white Nissan and texted him that I was there. He said he would be out in a minute, and when I saw him leave his house, I exited my car to meet him. We shook hands, and he began to tell me about the car. I looked on the inside and the outside, and after about 15 minutes, he asked if I wanted to test drive it. At this point, I really liked the car, and I said yes, I would like to test drive it. He gave me the keys and I got inside and started it. He got into the passenger side. I drove the car out of his street and onto a busier road. It drove well, and I was thinking that I would actually like to buy the car. He made a lot of conversation with me as I drove, which I found slightly annoying, but I didn't mind too much, and figured he's just a talkative guy. After about 10 minutes of driving, I told him I would head back now. He looked surprised and told me I should drive it around some more. I said all right, and I kept driving. He told me to take a left at one point, and I assumed he was leading me back to his house. After a while later, he told me to take a right, and I did. But I didn't recognize where we were at all. I once again said we should head back, and I added that I really liked the car, and I was interested in buying it. Then I told him I really didn't know where we were, and he would have to direct me back. He then told me it would be a lot easier if he just drove, because it was kind of complicated. I said okay, and we pulled over and switched seats. As soon as he got in, I noticed he locked the doors, which made me a little worried, but I figured he just did it out of habit. He pulled the car onto the street and began driving. His conversation stopped, however, when he began driving, and we just drove silently for a few minutes. After about 10 minutes passed, I knew we should be getting close to his house, and I asked him if we were almost there. He didn't answer me. About another 10 minutes went by, and I started to get really concerned. I took out my phone to text my mom what was happening. As soon as I pulled out my phone, the man asked me what I was doing. Nothing, I said. He told me to put the phone away. I told him no, and asked him where he was taking me. He responded by trying to take my phone from me. I tucked my knees to my chest and held my phone close to me. At that point, he pulled over and stopped the car. I reclined my seat back as far as it would go and moved away from him into the back. He looked at me and told me to give him my phone. He said he didn't want to hurt me, and he wouldn't if I cooperated with him. We were parked on a fairly busy road, and to my surprise, after a couple minutes of arguing, I saw a truck pull over behind us. A man got out of the truck and came to the driver's window. He was a pretty big-looking man who wore a sweatshirt, a hat, and jeans. Brian rolled down his window. The man asked if we were okay, and if we needed a tow or anything. I knew I needed to get out of the car somehow, and this was my opportunity. Brian started to respond and say everything was fine. But I interrupted him and told him that no, our car was not working. I think the man could sense the panic on my face, and he asked Brian to get out of the car because he saw something wrong with the back exhaust. Brian hesitated, but got out. I didn't waste any time and unlocked the doors and ran out. I ran to the man's truck and stood by the passenger door. The man asked me what I was doing, and I asked him if he would give me a ride. I guess Brian realized he was no match for the larger man, because he then ran to his car and drove away. I called the police, and the man in the truck drove me back to my father's car at Brian's, where the police met us. Of course, Brian was gone. But we did get the license number, as well as the Craigslist listing. Within a couple days, they were able to catch Brian. I ended up getting a new car several weeks later. But I don't look at them alone anymore.